Our best recommendation is start with a silo, start with something that's going to provide immediate returns, and then you can scale over time as you get more comfortable with it.
Yeah, I agree with you because what I found out in business, when you're everything to everybody, you're nothing to no one, right? Right, welcome to the AI Space podcast, where we strive to empower AI founders, innovators, startups, and businesses to drive innovation and scale their initiatives with game-changing insights. I'm your host, Sanjay Kalluvilayil, founder and CEO of Stonehaas Advisors, focused on helping founders and businesses grow, transform, and scale their business to new levels and dimensions. This is our inaugural episode, so welcome. We have an exciting guest for you today. His name is AJ Green, founder and CEO of AI Advantage Agency. AJ has an inspiring journey overcoming challenges to become a leader in AI innovation. He's developed numerous AI applications and is dedicated to making AI accessible to small businesses and startups. Today we're going to discuss AI democratization, empowering businesses of all sizes, business scaling, cost-effective strategies to grow your business, technology challenges, AI stack, data, security, and privacy, ethical and responsible AI, balancing innovation with responsibility, and finally, encouragement, some final thoughts and insights. So let's dive right in. Hey, AJ, welcome here on the AI Space podcast. We highlight game-changing insights that drive innovation and scale business and initiatives. What insights have you seen in the past year that founders are using to scale up their businesses?
That is a great question. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on the inaugural episode. How exciting. I think the audience is definitely going to gain a lot of insights from this over time, and I'm just happy to be a part of it. So some of the insights that I've seen recently when it comes to founders being able to scale is twofold. The first part is looking at AI as a scaling machine. I think that a lot of business owners and founders, when they're looking at implementing AI, that's one of the things that starts to stand out is the fact that we can replace a lot of our repetitive, tendencies and tasks with things that are automated. So having automation to scale allows us to increase the output, by hundreds of multitudes of scale. And I think that's an incredibly powerful thing, especially when you're working with a small team. For example, say that we have a startup that is 10 people. Everybody's wearing multiple different hats all the time. We all know how it goes. But the ability to introduce AI and implement it in a way that allows you to achieve better scale is one of the main things that I've seen within this past year for a lot of the businesses we've worked with. And the second thing is the hyper-personalization. And this is something that I'm a huge proponent of, which is AI's ability to take in extremely vast amounts of data and being able to hyper-personalize what that message or sequence or customer experience looks like for the end user is something that I think we're beginning to see this year, and we will definitely see a whole lot more next year when we get into the realm of agentic workflows.
Wow, amazing. AJ, that's why we started the show, that AI founders can drive innovation and scale their business. And I can tell that our audience is going to gain a wealth of knowledge from you today. Before we continue, I want to invite everyone to follow AJ Green and like, comment, subscribe to the AI Space podcast, because that helps us grow the show to have more impressive guests like AJ. Before we go into your background, actually, we want to level set for folks. How do you define AI?
Excellent question. And I think that it's important to understand the distinction between machine learning, generative AI, and there's a lot of different vocabulary that gets thrown around inside of the space. So when I'm looking at things that we qualify as AI, we're looking at algorithms or engines that are able to predict the next work output, which falls under the category of generative AI. And typically, these are algorithms or engines that are focused on business implementation, content generation, customer service, things of that nature. But I think defining AI is a very challenging thing. I could say from an academic standpoint, we could go with like computational models, but I think everybody knows it better as like the key foundational models, such as things like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. I think that's a great starting place for a lot of people if they're curious about what AI can do.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think there's multiple flavors and ways to approach AI, but fundamentally to me is using computers or machines to analyze information, think and reason, and make decisions similar to humans. And at some point, it's going to exceed humans, right? And in some ways, they can process data a lot faster than humans, but that's great. Can you tell us more about your background and how you got here? What led you on this foray into AI and your path in founding AI Advantage Agency?
Oh, I love telling this story. It
I can
is,
already tell I'm going to love it.
yeah, it's pretty unique, I have to say. So,
Yeah.
I will give a foreword to the audience that up until 3 years ago, I never expected that I would be in the tech field, let alone in AI. I actually grew up in a family of athletes, and for my entire life, fitness was my trajectory. I was a professional athlete myself, so I got paid to move heavy things as an Olympic weightlifter. I was in the fitness industry for 10 years, and that was where I got my work with upper management and working with small businesses. And so that was my background. And I loved Olympic weightlifting, but unfortunately, I suffered this catastrophic injury that actually left me paralyzed for a few months. And this was around the emergence of ChatGPT in late 2022. So to kind of paint the picture, I'm, a young adult. I'm at the height of my career as an Olympic weightlifter, getting national titles. Next thing I know, I am so crippled that I can't even move my eye to the side of my peripheral. So it radically changed my output on what I wanted to do with my life. And I think at the time it was the hardest physical thing that I had been through. But looking back at it, it introduced me to this new field that I just fell in love with. So as I'm, not able to physically move my body, my mind is moving a million miles a minute all the time. And that's when I started to just mess around with ChatGPT, as most people did when they started to come out. And what turned from a passion, quickly followed by an obsession, I really wanted to dive more into the space. And I knew that because I didn't have a traditional background with computer science and machine learning as compared to a lot of other people in the industry, I knew that I had to get very quickly up to speed. So over the course of 6 months when I was undergoing my rehab, I went through 15 different certifications, places like Princeton and Harvard and IBM, and I tried to soak up as much knowledge as I could. And through this process of soaking up the knowledge, I started to understand with a little bit of my business background and some previous ventures that I'd been in, that there was a very serious gap in the market when it came to AI for startups and small businesses. And I think that this is something that a lot of us are in the space are aware of, is the fact that AI has been around for decades. But traditionally it's used by big data companies who are working with 6 to 18 month timelines, typically millions of dollars on their budget. And the startup and small businesses were something that I felt really passionate about and that I didn't want those people to get left behind. So that was kind of the genesis behind getting into AI Advantage, was looking at trying to advocate for minority owned businesses and startups and small businesses, but building things that are cheaper and faster than our competitors, but always at the same quality.
Oh, that's amazing. So going back to the Olympic weightlifting, so what was your category, or what was the event or sport, however you define it, that you're in?
Yeah, so I was clean and the snatch. And those are two, yeah, very physically taxing movements, a lot of strain on the body. And what ended me to stop the career was a spinal injury that, funny enough, didn't think anything of it at the time. I was going through my day, my typical training routine. I'd finished the session. I started to go into recovery, and next thing I know, I'm like, oh my god, I can't move. I'm actually like physically not able to move. I then had to like crawl across the floor for 2 hours just to get to my bedroom, and lay there until I had all the help come in and get me. So yeah, definitely a crazy moment in time. And like I said, I think that at the time I thought it was going to be life altering, and it was. It turned out to be. So, and I'm just glad that I was able to pivot into a technology that I thought was very interesting at the time, and now I'm seeing the rest of the world is also seeing that same value.
Well, I'm sorry that injury happened. I'm glad you're doing great. I mean, it shows that that's testament to the strength of your, not your just your physical being, but your mental state and your spirit. So kudos to you for making that
Thank you.
transition. And it's interesting. I have 30 plus years in consulting and working with different companies, and I got a stage in my life where I need to transition out, and so I actually been doing AI certifications, getting into the space and working with different companies. So it's interesting. And so, we're going back to, you said Chat GPT. We may have folks that are not familiar with large language models and how those work. And chat is the conversational portion of it. G is for generative, P is for pre-trained, and then T is for transformer, right? So they pre-train on a lot of data. They get trained to predict the next word or next sequence based on probabilities, right? And try to understand the meaning and context between different forms of data. And it's usually text, right? So great. All right.
Yeah.
AI democratization. Will or how can AI spawn the next unicorn or unicorns to dethrone the incumbent tech behemoths?
Wow. That's a phenomenal question. This is actually one that I was very interested to get into because it revolves around the thesis of what AI advantage is, right? And that is that we know that generative AI, being the newer subset of AI, is going to lead to democratization of AI in the sense that we are now able to build things quicker, faster, and cheaper than we previously were. Think about software development 10 years ago versus today look like two completely different scenes. I think that as AI continues to improve and as we get into these new convergence and capabilities, that we're going to see the barrier to entry for AI is going to continue to come down. A great reference of this is with a lot of the coding assistants that we've been seeing coming onto the scene over the last year. So to look at democratization, I think it's great to look at a specific use case to try to understand how this works. So if we were to look at software engineering 10 years ago, as you know, we had our front end developers, back end developers, people that had, specific niches and skill sets. And that was, we needed a culmination of a team to come together in order to launch a product. And typically that was taking X amount of time, normally in months to years, with very large budgets like we were talking about. Then when we get into some of the latest releases that are, things like Cursor, Replit Agent, Windsurf by Codium, and the list goes on and on. There's a lot of coding assistants that have come onto the scene, and their primary purpose is being able to augment that coding experience, where they're able to be experts across multiple different languages. And ultimately, what used to take a team of people months to do, we can now do with one program in a matter of an hour. So just the ability to reduce that entry to barrier, I think, is a really great way to level the playing field. I also think that it's really important for small businesses to understand this concept as well, particularly because I think that small businesses have more to gain by implementing AI than larger businesses. One of the use cases for this was one of our enterprise clients that we were working with, who we will not name, but is a very large, everybody uses them to pay people every day, is all I'll say. And we were able to jump their revenue by upwards of 5% by implementing these really advanced AI systems. But at the end of the day, it was just a 5% increase, right? So for them, they were doing backflips, but for us, it wasn't quite revolutionary. Versus when we're looking at working with startups and small businesses, we've been able to take people's revenue and 70x it over the matter of 6 months, which has obviously profound impact on those people's lives. So I think that there's more to be gained by small businesses than large businesses when it comes to AI, and I think democratization is the next wave.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you because as an entrepreneur, you have to look at your OPEX and CAPEX and being able to hire, especially if you're a solopreneur and, you can go hire fractionals or offshore, but a lot now with automations, you can connect from your marketing campaign to your CRM to, you know, developing different strategies. And also, I like what you said about the coding aspect too, is that instead of having to figure out all this coding, you can put in these no code systems that generate the outputs for you, right? I mean, there's going to be some challenges from the existing coders in that, but hopefully it frees up their time to focus on quality and more creativity, right?
Definitely. And I think that goes into a bigger conversation about replacement versus augmentation. And I think that it's great to look at software because it's something that we're all familiar with. But it's definitely a bigger topic that could be applied, across the board.
How can business owners and executives use AI as a force to trigger a quantum leap in growing and scaling their businesses?
Yes. So my best recommendation, if you're looking for that quantum leap in your business, is looking at what gives you the quickest return or investment. And this is from a little bit of our experience. So, over the past year, we've completed 700 different AI projects, which has gained us a lot of insights across different industries. And what we noticed is, and in particular, working with startups and small businesses that have yet to leverage AI, a great starting point is to focus on things that provide a immediate ROI. So, this is typically within the sales, lead generation, and customer service realm. I think that if you're a small business owner and you're looking to be able to take your business and jump to that next level, looking at something that is tangible, that provides a very quick return on your ROI is going to be the first step of many to be able to scale your business. And the reason is because when they get that initial ROI, it does two things. Number one, it shows them that, hey, the implementation or the system that I'm focused on is actually working, and starting with a silo rather than starting with an entire system is much more tangible. And the number two thing is that if we focus on an immediate ROI, it actually puts more money back into the business, which then allows them to focus on further developments. So that's our best recommendation is start with a silo, start with something that's going to provide immediate returns, and then you can scale over time as you get more comfortable with it.
Yeah, I agree with you because what I found out in business, when you're everything to everybody, you're nothing to no one, right? And if it's great if you're a large company and you can target the mass market, right? Whether you're Coca-Cola or what have you, right? But when you're starting out, you need to really identify what problem that you're solving. What are the pain points that you're going to be addressing? Who's that going to be that target market? Identifying that niche, creating that unique value proposition that's going to address those pain points or deliver an ROI, right? Have a solid offer, be able to pitch it and close it, have a discussion, right? And to build on that. And that's critical. And what I found also is that a lot of people have a great strategy, they have a lot of great technology, they're able to put all those things together, but then they got a $10 million check or whatever it is to go run the business. And where are the clients, where are the customers? Did they do any client research? Did they understand the client pain points? And the revenue's not coming in. And I think one of the key investments, especially from an AI perspective, is really on the sales and marketing side, right? To be able to build the campaigns to target those specific, that client base, right? And to be able to get in front of them and to start generating revenues, right? Because as you said, you have to get some quick wins and to be able to, and it's going to help you iterate your solution or product or service, whatever you're going to do. And that's the key thing, is not to think you got to build everything and then people are going to come, or it's perfect then. It's okay. It's not going to be perfect in the beginning. You need a minimum viable product that gets out there, that people are trying and they're giving you feedback and you're building a community and moving forward. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that is phenomenal advice. And that actually is a paraphrase coming from Jensen Huang, who's the CEO of NVIDIA, one of the most valuable people in the space right now. He talks about how at NVIDIA, they don't have a 1-year roadmap or a 5-year roadmap. They do everything as a daily operation. And his whole goal when they were transitioning from being in the gaming industry into chip production with the GPUs was focus on how can I take my development cycle of 6 months and condense it down into 6 days. And that was the goal that he was repeatedly telling himself. And like you said, it wasn't about getting everything perfect off the bat. It was about shipping quickly, putting it out into the customer, and then listening to the customer. And the customer will give you that roadmap more than you can identify just with strategy or data. So I think that's a massively important thing. And one thing to talk about too when we're talking about the sales and lead generation is, like I mentioned, we've done several hundred projects for our independent clients that are one of one. But we just launched a new product last Monday, and this is the first product that we launched on a SaaS marketplace. And just to show, this is in the realm of lead generation and sales. And without getting too much into the weeds, what we were able to do was we built a database that has 900 billion parameters. So talk about AI's ability to consume a large amount of data. And it creates hyper-personalized messages that go from having, a 20% response rate with typical direct messages, or a 5% response rate with emails, all the way up to 80% response rate. And when we finished our beta, we were actually able to get a 500x ROAS, believe it or not. So without having to spend ridiculous amounts of money, hyper-personalized AI that is focused on lead generation and sales tends to be, from our experience, the best way. And that's why we wanted to release it to the marketplace.
So you use the term ROAS, return on advertising spend. Can you explain that to those that are not familiar with that?
Absolutely. So ROAS, or return on advertising spend, is essentially if you can give me $1 for my advertising, how much money can I get in return? So with this particular product, we were able to give it $1 and it was able to return us $500, which is pretty off the charts. And that's a great thing when you're looking at creating a marketing budget. Is I think that we're beginning to see this transition away from paid ads that typically have a lower ROAS into things that are hyper personalized and focusing on identifying the right target. It tends to be a lot cheaper with a lot better success rate at the end of the day.
No, you're absolutely right because I've tried different, you experiment and try when you're first starting as an entrepreneur, different campaigns on LinkedIn and other things, and there's very, people don't respond, they're not clicking through. And what I've heard is a good benchmark rate is a response rate or someone responding 20 to 25%. And then, if you can get to 50%, that's another thing. And then ROAS, even if you're like on a SaaS product, in traditional ones, well, what, maybe 3 to 5, if you're lucky, a ROAS, right? And so, getting to 500% is amazing. And so there's probably a lot of, to do that, the AI is probably analyzing the ideal customer profile, putting the messages in there, right? A lot of automations in there. So
Definitely.
some insights you can provide on maybe under the hood for some of maybe our,
Sure.
our more technical folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we were thinking about lead generation, and again, this kind of goes into product development, is you said it at the beginning, which was we have to solve a problem, right? Our value comes from solving problems. So what was the problem that people were having? Was that a lot of the AI lead generation that exists on the market was underperforming and overpriced. So what that means for us is that we were previous clients of a lot of our competitors, and from our firsthand experience, we were said, hey, this is giving us really generic messages. We're not targeting the right people. We're getting left in the inbox. So those were the problems that we wanted to solve. So from like a technical standpoint, the first thing that we did was build this super comprehensive database. So in that database, we have over 900 million different business owners, and we did that by scraping a culmination of different databases. And that was great. That was great to be able to have a database that's comprehensive.
So when you say you're scraping, so define that for some of our folks, and then what kind of tool did you use to scrape? Because that's not very easy.
Yeah, and especially on that scale as well. So scraping is when we have a computer or machine retrieve all the digital footprints that exist about an individual or a page. So for this instance, when we're using scraping, I built a scraping tool. So this was just a little bit of back-end code that I was able to input some search parameters. So I was able to say, we're looking for Sanjay. Here is his website, and here's everything that I can figure out about him. Typically, looking off of a LinkedIn profile is a great place to start. And then we were able to say, okay, let's go ahead and convert Sanjay's website into HTML so the AI can understand it. Then let's go ahead and look through the social media posts that we have public access to, and let's go ahead and put that into a TXT or a CSV, just different formats that the AI is easier to read. And what that ended up doing was actually giving us over 1,000 data points for every single prospect. So for example, we have that 900 million business owners, but then each business owner has over 1,000 data points. So what that allowed us to do was to understand, for example, let's talk about for Sanjay, we're able to understand, here's what he's posting about on social media. Here's the things that he likes or comments on. Here's what it says about him on his website. Here's the digital footprint that exists. And it gave us this very valuable insight as to what Sanjay cares about, and therefore when we're able to look at that messaging, we're able to have a lot better resonance with our target. So that was the first part, was the database. The second part was the hyper-personalization, which again I think is the biggest buzzword for marketing in 2025. And when we say hyper-personalization, we are thinking about the AI's ability to take in large amounts of data and create something that is unique specifically to that person. So for that, we were building a custom model for every client that we work with, which is a pretty radical idea. A lot of the competition, what they do is they use what's called GPT wrappers. So this is where they're taking the infrastructure of GPT, so taking that engine, and then just layering a little bit of prompting on top of it, maybe a little bit of function calling, but it's something that's essentially like a half-baked, slightly better alternative. And what this resulted in is all these generic responses. And I'm sure anybody who's listening to this has definitely been subject to this, where there has been inboxes, messages in their inbox that seem really generic. So what we decided was, hey, we don't want to use a one-size-fits-all model. We're actually going to build a custom model for every client, which is pretty extensive in terms of the back end. But what it's going to do is allow us to have messages that actually sound like Sanjay and that know what Sanjay's experience is and the business ventures he's been into. So not only do we have a great understanding of the target, we also have a great understanding of our client. And the last bit on top of that was just the ability, just like a sales development representative, the ability to follow up and to take action items and to book meetings. That was the last bit, which happens with a little bit of function calling, which I'm happy to explain as well.
Okay, no, great. And so that's interesting too. So how would you address those that are a little bit concerned about the data privacy? And I'm sure like some people are like getting a little concerned. It's great for businesses and salespeople, but what about the person on the receiving end, right? How do we address some of that aspect?
So I would say, and I do get this question quite a bit, and I think it's a great question to ask. So we live in an age where everything is digitized, which is great and it has lots of benefits for us. There are also lots of concerns for privacy. So I'd say if you're somebody who's listening to this and you do not want to be subject to products like anti-spam or other types of outreach, then the best thing that you can do is limit the amount of data that you put out onto the web, because once it goes out into the web, it exists. You can also put your accounts on private. You can encrypt some of your messages. There are other steps that you can take to have more data privacy and more control. But ultimately, we understand that we live in a world where some people are willing to trade privacy for the convenience of being on social platforms and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's a great question. It breaks it down to more of like an individual. How much information are you willing to put online in exchange for how much do you want to get out of certain apps or experiences?
I get that because I'm traditionally a private person in some aspects, right? I do have Facebook and Instagram and have my own community. But as an entrepreneur and starting this AI podcast, I'm putting more information out there, right? And now I go to the different sites, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity, even Copilot. Now, you can get a little bio on even myself, right? I mean, I'll be honest, I did a little bio on you on those things, right? So, but going back to what you said about Wrapper, so, on ChatGPT, there's the basic ChatGPT where you can get the premium version, right? There's also custom GPTs because those ChatGPTs trained on general data, like Wikipedia or websites, general data, right? But if you want to get into like finance or a special use case like social media posts, right? You can create a custom GPT and give it some prompts to be able to do that and automate that, right? And that's what you mean by some of the basic wrapper, right? And so you're fine tuning to do specific tasks, right? So it's kind of like, somebody had studied for a test, say it's a history test, right? And you can read all the information, but now you find out it's American history test or Texas history, right? Then you have to fine tune your studying and the responses and predictions for that particular case, right?
Exactly. And I think that when we talk about GPT wrappers, they tend to get, funny enough, a bad rap in the tech space. And I don't think that they deserve the bad rap. I think that they have a very unique use case. The ways that we like to use them, because we love GPTs, the custom GPTs. The way that we like to use them is to quickly validate product ideas. Think about when we're talking about the MVP. For people that are non-technical or people that are maybe entering into coding, when you're looking at custom GPTs, it's a great way to get your product out quickly and to understand, okay, if this has product market fit and I'm starting to see traction with this GPT, this might make sense to actually create a roadmap for something a little bit more advanced. So we use it mainly for rapid prototyping, as well as some like of our internal use cases. But I think it's a great starting place. If you are using AI and you're using things like GPT and Claude, Claude has their own counterpart of this as well. And you're finding that this AI is great, but it's very generalized. And we talked about the meaning of GPT. I have another saying for GPT, which is general purpose technology, and the meaning that it does everything okay, right? It does everything pretty well. It doesn't do anything exceptionally well. And if you want to do something that is a little bit more fine tuned use case, and you want to do exceptionally well, that's when I would say custom GPTs make sense as a great starting place.
No, I agree with you. I've used it for brainstorming, even for this podcast. I'll be honest, but the questions, I'll put in my thoughts and questions. Nothing ever comes out right. I mean, I had a limited amount of time, but it was good. It saved me a lot of time. But at the end of the day, I have to use my own creativity, my wit, my 30 plus years of experience of professionalism dealing. How do you write things and think things through and make it a little bit more viral? But there's things they can bring to the table as a brainstorming partner. But at the end of the day, you have to own the final product and the creativity and put your own spirit into it, right?
Yeah, and one of the rules that we like to use is we call it 10-80-10. So we think that when we're working with AI, and this isn't a co-pilot. So for those that are not familiar, there's kind of two different structures to an AI. There is an autopilot, which means that the AI is going to do something on your behalf, and there's the co-pilot, which is working with like a coworker, where it's augmented. And when we're looking at a co-pilot solution, the 10-80-10 rule is essentially that the human does 10% the first 10% of the work, and that is where you're creating the system, the structure, the ideation. That's where your natural creativity comes in. Then you outsource to AI, and AI does 80% of the work in terms of generating it, refining it, being able to have large output. But then the last 10% has to do with something like an editor, where you're fine tuning that last 10% of the product before it goes out. So the 10% is you creating the system, the AI does 80% of the legwork, and then you do the 10% of pitching it in to finish.
No, I agree with you, especially in the last part. Make sure it's the right wording, creativity. There's going to be typos, and even from an AI, there may be things that may, depending on what guardrails you put in there in terms of, is it appropriate language, right? Is it going to offend certain groups? Is there bias in it, right? There's obviously errors. There's something called hallucinations, where kind of like us, if you say that you asked me a question about some topic I didn't understand, I could either say I don't know the answer, or I could just make up an answer based on whatever
Yeah.
I. And sometimes the GPTs do that, right? They make up an answer, so you can't always trust what's being produced, right? And it's only as good, and in data, it's always garbage in, garbage out. So it's depend. I mean, just because they're scraping the internet, right, or other databases or what have you. So it depends on what the quality of that information was that went into that training when it was being pre-trained, right? So those are things you have to look for in terms of the bias and other issues, right?
Absolutely. And I think you said one of my favorite phrases when it comes to prompt engineering, which is bad in, bad out, good in, good out. I taught a class on this yesterday at a steam conductor unit, and they were blown away with how much of a difference prompt engineering makes. And I think that for those that are listening to this that are not quite familiar with what prompt engineering is essentially the science and the process of being able to make certain modifications to, like you said, the guardrails and the parameters, but you're making these certain adjustments in order to increase the output or the efficiency of the model. And again, we could do a whole talk on prompt engineering right there, but just as like a high level overview, when we say good in, good out is if you give AI a good response if you give AI a good prompt, then you can expect to get a good output. Versus if you give it something like a bad prompt, then you can expect to get a bad output. And obviously, based on what you're prompting, good and bad can be relative. But I think that's a really important thing for people to learn. And a great way to actually learn about this is Anthropic recently released this feature into their Claude, and Claude is essentially the counterpart to GPT from Anthropic that has prompt engineering optimization as part of their process. So you can ask it, for example, hey, please go ahead and enhance my prompt, and it'll actually walk you through the steps of what it does in order to have a better output. So I think that's a great place to learn.
Yeah, no, yeah, prompt engineering is great, and I've used it. You can ask a generic question, right? Give tell me, give me your opinion on this message that I put together, right? Or then you can say, I've done where as a marketing and branding expert, optimize this message for maximum impact, and use a professional tone. So it gives it some prompts to optimize that return, right? Or if I'm want to know the etymology of a word or in some foreign language, I'll say as a linguistics expert, X, Y, and Z to be able to do this. And so I think that changes in terms of the output. And I know Perplexity also, they try to get to be instead of a search engine an answer engine, right? And they actually provide some of the links, but also give you follow up questions that you could be asking based on what's been produced. So there's some ideas there too, and ideas of like chain of thought and parallel chain of thought and those
Absolutely, the
types of
fun stuff.
concepts, right? Yeah. All right.
100%.
How can a business build an AI citadel without drowning in technology complexity, data chaos, and security breaches?
Wow. Phenomenal question. Phenomenal question. I think that the first thing is if you are anticipating an AI citadel, and I love that use of the word. The first thing that you need to do is make sure that your data is organized and that it is cleaned. So, what I mean by that is we've worked with a lot of businesses who want to be using AI for multiple different departments and operations, but their data is all over the place and it's so messy that the AI can't make proper use of it. So, the first thing is if you want to avoid chaos, which then leads into hallucinations, like we're talking about, the best thing you can do is make sure that you have clean data to start. My next step is making sure that we start with a silo, like we were talking about originally, which is making sure that you can find one good use case that is by itself, that doesn't have cascading impacts across different departments or operations. And you can start with that individual use case to see how the AI plays out in your business before you scale into, having AI run everything. The other bit to mention when we're talking about data privacy is keeping in mind that depending upon the model that you're using, most of the models are using your conversational history as training data. So if you're going to be uploading sensitive financial information or sensitive information about your business and key components and whether that's protected IP, it's very important to recognize that you should find a sandbox solution, which means a solution that is isolated, that's not connected to the World Wide Web, or that you should take other means such as encryption or data access controls as a preventative measure to try and make sure that your sensitive information doesn't get used as training data. So if I had to summarize, I would say starting with clean data is great, then focusing on one high impact area that you can use as a silo, and then keeping in mind that you either want to find a solution that is sandboxed or a solution that is encrypted, so that way you can keep that sensitive information away from overbearing eyes.
No, you're absolutely right. I think it's going back to people forget that there's different types of data, right? There's general data. Let's use like internet, Wikipedia data, right? There's your personal data, there's corporate data, and there's your customer data, right? So, that's what information you really want to put into a general model that can be put out there and be out in the open and get trained. And there may be some backdoors to get that information, right? So I think it's important to be able to understand, okay, there's some things you can't put in a general model, right? But if you have some personal information, you need to be able to silo that, partition that. Your corporate information, you don't want to be putting your corporate, like say you're working for a Fortune 500 company or any company, right? You want to be putting any sensitive financial data, trade secrets into those things. And if people are brainstorming on ChatGPT and they may be accidentally putting in some information, right? And then you can't put in client data either. You have to be able to have a separate database for that, especially if you're in the medical field, because there's HIPAA violations, right, etc. So those are considerations people have to look through. What about security of all this information, right? What is your approach to that, or thoughts on that?
So when it comes to security, we actually have different access controls for different people in our organization. So for a lot of the systems that we build for our own process, that means that obviously founders have the highest amount of control over what information is being shared, and I think that that's a great way to try to keep us secure. So that way, a lot of our entry level and administrative positions are not able to access some of the higher level or more private conversations. That's one way to approach it. We also approach it from a different standpoint too, which is using VPNs and private IPs. So we make sure that and I think this is part of a larger conversation about cybersecurity, which is another one of my big passions, which is making sure that like we talked about, as the world tends to become more digital over time, and we have more of our digital footprint that exists online, it becomes ever more important every day to make sure that you have proper data privacy. And the best way to do that is just setting up a proxy with a VPN. And that's a way to at least give you a level of protection above just being out on the open, open network.
Yeah, no, great. Um, as an advocate for ethical AI practices, what advice do you have for founders balancing innovation with responsibility? I think this ties to our previous conversation about data, privacy, security, etc. Right? What are your, and we talked about guardrails, parameters. What are your thoughts on this?
So we have a hot take on AI ethics in the sense that we feel extremely responsible for the innovation of this technology. And I think that comes from us being on the cutting edge and always looking over the peering glass to see what's coming next with the technology. At AI Advantage, we make sure that for every client that we work with, that we have similar values in terms of the AI ethics. And I'll explain a little bit on what that means. So I think this is part of a larger conversation about when we look at the workforce, because I think those are the people that are impacted most, across the world, is the conversation of augmentation versus replacement. So when I say that we feel this very strong ethical responsibility is that we think that we should always be pushing the technology, and we should be innovating, and that's our job. But we should always be keeping humans at the front of the mind. Is that we want to create a human-centric technology and not so much something that is prioritizing just the development of these models. But when we talk about replacement versus augmentation, this is where we get into a pretty interesting conversation, which is a lot of businesses that we work with tend to have two different viewpoints. When they start implementing AI, and especially moving away from a silo into something that's like a full-scale operations, we have two different perspectives, which is number one, that AI should replace individuals. An example of this is we were working with a company, and we are working on sales tools, and I'm not going to say who the company is, but they were essentially under the impression that, hey, great, the better that these tools get, the more that I can lay off my staff because it's a lot cheaper to run AI than it is to pay these humans, which in our opinion is the wrong way to go about technology. And we actually had to cut ties with this client simply because we don't want to be a part of that problem in terms of them being able to lay off their entire team just because we got tools to a point where it's able to do so. So we push people in the direction of augmentation, which is, I think, a human-centric viewpoint, which is how can the AI replace some of our busy work, which frees up our human creativity and time for things that have a bigger impact. And I think that we can dive more into that, but we definitely think that having ethics at frame of mind and a human centric philosophy is very important when it comes to building this technology.
No, I agree with you. And a lot of times people just dive into implementing AI, right? Haven't thought through the the data requirements, how to segregate or aggregate that data, the privacy issues, security, etc. So I always say the first thing you need to do is take a step back and put some sort of framework in. It's a governance model, your ethical framework, etc. I think taking that step back, putting a governance model in place in terms of, like you said, who's going to have access to the information, what are the sources of information, right? Where are they going to be stored, right? How it's going to be used, and what's the intent of it? Like, is it, yeah, the last thing we want to do is to completely lay off everybody. I think I agree with you. It should be more augmentation or complementary. It's like you're freeing up people's creativity instead of spending hours doing research or manual things, or now they can focus on the creativity, decision making, the things that AI can free us up to do, right? And I think that's what makes us human, is to be able to use our intelligence, our creativity, our spirit, our character to create, amazing things, right?
And I think you hit it on the nail too, which is, or hit the nail on the head, in the sense that I think we see this very common phenomenon inside of AI, especially over the last 2 years, which is I call it the shiny object syndrome, which is people are always focused on, hey, this new product, this new feature came out, let's dive into it. And like you said, people dive in head first and they're always focused on what's the newest and latest thing. In my opinion, there's nothing wrong with that, but you do need to take a breather first and look at what should my architecture be, what should my roadmap look like. I think that stopping and having a little bit of thought prior to implementation saves you a lot of heartache and troubles on the back end of it.
Right. Agree with you. Say that someone's a business founder, then, or say that a person with just a thought or an idea, right? Or they maybe may not have the technology understanding and don't know where to go, right? What would your be recommendation to be those folks that are looking? Hey, I don't have a technology partner. I have a great idea that's going to solve a problem, and they're maybe not even to an MVP yet, minimum viable product. What would be your advice to them, or how could they engage someone like you, or in a similar space, right? What would be your approach to that?
So that's a great question. That's a great question. I would say if you're somebody who has an idea and you are pre MVP, you're pre product market fit, the first thing that I would do is talk to experts in the field. And you'd be so surprised how many people are willing to give you their time in exchange for just a little bit of mentorship. And what I mean by that is I've noticed that one of the elements that can make you extremely successful when it comes to rolling out AI is talking to people in that industry who have done similar things to you in the past, or people that have industry knowledge. I'll put this into perspective. Like when I was first doing AI and our first few projects, I was building things that were related to the fitness industry because that's where I had a lot of contextual knowledge and industry knowledge. So I understood the market very well. So I knew what type of product was going to succeed there. I wasn't going to go into building a pharmaceutical tool when I had no idea about pharmaceuticals, right? So if you're somebody with an idea, the first thing is talk to somebody inside of that industry and see if the problem that you think they have is the same problem that they do have. That will save you, again, a lot of trouble. Then the next thing is looking at these different courses. I think that there is such a large volume of information that exists online for free that that would be my next step. Is after talking to industry experts, I would look at some resources. Just to name a few, would be the Coursera series, Google DeepMind, LinkedIn. They all have these really advanced and beginner level AI classes that I think are great at pushing you along. And then ultimately, once you have done those two things, that's when I would start to have conversations with people inside of the AI space and say, hey, this was my idea. I validated it with this industry. I have a minimal understanding, but I have some level of understanding of how this technology could apply, the limitations and capabilities. Now, from your expert opinion, what would be the thing to take me to that next level?
Right, right. No, that's great advice. And also, I think once you get to that level too, there's a couple incubators out there that they can reach out to and test their idea and help them. They may not have a technology founder or partner, but can connect them with other folks that can kind of help them build out that company too, right?
Yes, and you would be so surprised how many of these organizations exist. For example, Sanjay and I, we met through one of these organizations that is a program, the chief executives with Monica Cowley, and that was how we got connected. And that's an example right there that it's a group of high performers and people that are all focused on giving to each other and supporting each other in the ecosystem. And this is something that, that's a great example, but there's examples like that across most cities in the country. I'm very involved in the local ecosystem in Portland. So if somebody's local to Portland, I do a lot of work with the Washington County Chamber of Commerce, with the governors and the senators. I'm very involved in what our local ecosystem looks like, and I would reckon that most places would have opportunities like that.
No, you're absolutely right. I've been attending networking events, business side, AI. Yeah, it was CEO Connections with Monica Coney. We were on a virtual networking event, and I heard you mention something. I said, "Oh, he's in the AI space. I should reach out to him." And we had a separate conversation about virtual CTOs. Maybe we can talk about that. It's like, you know, um, once you get past the MVP stage, or you're trying to create that product and you need to scale this, right? How does like a virtual CTO work? Can you explain to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So with a virtual CTO,
Or fractional or virtual, however you want to
yeah,
describe it.
yeah, and I think there's two routes, which is very interesting, and one of the routes has come about recently. So the first thing is, like you said, a fractional position. So this would be somebody like yourself that has large amounts of industry knowledge, and typically can be an advisor or a consultant to that business. So say, for example, that you have this product idea, you might be a little bit technical, maybe you're non-technical, and the next thing is you can look for people on your, board of advisors, people as mentors, in a fractional sense that are able to point you in the right direction, and that's incredibly helpful. The second thing that I think is really interesting that we are starting to see, which is a AI CTO. And this actually relates to some of the projects that we've built in the past, which is essentially using AI and building an AI, again, using a no-code, low-code platform, or, something like a custom GPT, and having that AI essentially coach you through the technical aspects of your project are also very interesting. Like that, we built a suite like this. This was one of our earlier projects that we called AI for Startups. And believe it or not, what we did was we took millions and millions of data points across multiple different domains, and we made essentially an AI CEO, a CTO, a CSO, a CRO, all the C-suite executives, and we were able to essentially distill industry knowledge from hundreds and hundreds of different teachings into a RAG model, which is retrieval augmented generation. And then with
And
that,
that's a separate database when you're going RAG.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, so we built all these RAG models that we called AI for Startups, and it was a suite where any solopreneur was able to come and gain access to all these immense tools, which kind of leads us into the conversation too of with Sam Altman, some of his predictions. They came out with Operator last week, which I'm not sure if you saw that. It's essentially their next multi-agent framework, which is I think where the whole industry is headed. But when he did that press release, he was talking about how he expects Operator to be a catalyst for the first solopreneur billionaires that the world has ever seen. And again, talking about this concept of using AI to outsource some of the problems and skill sets that you may not have as a solopreneur.
It's kind of like business in a box in a sense, right? And you used a lot of acronyms earlier. So CTO, Chief Technology Officer, CRO, Chief Revenue Officer. You said CSO, so there could be either security, strategy, depends on what the organization, right?
Yeah, I was security.
Yeah. No, that's great. And then for the audience that aren't familiar with fractional, so instead of going hiring an executive for several $100,000 or whatever it's going to be, or equity models, etc., you can hire consultants or fractional executives that maybe for 10 hours a week or 20 hours a week, and we're on a retainer model to work with you, right? And so it's not a full-time basis. And so there are people that want to work in that type of environment and model, right? And then, yeah, even what you're talking about, operator, those are things in my head that I'm trying to use, in some of my entrepreneurial activities too. Is like, how do I automate this and think this and use these tools as a partner for me to make some of these decisions, right? But it requires, but to be able to do those, you have to have some sort of experience, know how to ask the right questions and to read the outputs and make decisions on that, right? Too. So it's not magic.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also not plug and play either. I think that this is a misconception that we talk about the road to AGI, and Operator is definitely a milestone on the road to AGI. AGI is autogenerative intelligence. So this is where we get to the next level upon AI, and this is what some people termed as super intelligence. The true definition is something of a work in progress, but essentially it's that next level of AI that's able to take autonomous decisions after the input. I think it's the best way for us to describe it. So yeah, when we're looking at Operator, which is OpenAI's multi-agent framework, I think there's a lot of people who think, oh, great, I'll just be able to plug and play with Operator and I'll be off to the races. They don't realize that, like you said, if you don't take the time to specialize it and customize it to what you need and train it on the types of outputs that you're looking for, then you might end up, with an incredibly complex system, but something that's not prescribed for you individually.
So, I think we're getting to near the end of the show, but so any concluding thoughts, insights, encouragement to those seeking to get into space or struggling to build their business? Maybe from your perspective, from your experience, just, so what would you say to the folks that are out there that, hey, I'm trying to get in or I'm kind of struggling in this, right?
I would say that in the age of which we live in, there are so many resources and pieces of information that exist that it is simply up to you to find the right ones that work. And when I say that is you could spend every second of every day until the end of your life just tapping into the existing frameworks and articles that exist. The information is there. The main limitation is going to be your ability to test that information, come to a conclusion, and find out how it applies to you. And I would say that that's a great thing for people to looking to break in. And I would say for those that are in the space or looking to get into the space, one thing that I always strive to tell people is that agility and discipline are your two best friends. Agility meaning that over the next few years, we're going to see more and more models, more and more products that are going to blow people's socks off, truly. And like that shiny object syndrome, not everything is something that you should be rushing towards. So being agile to understand, hey, this is an opportunity for me to push it and continue shipping what I'm doing, or this is a time for me to pivot and to approach this new technology and adapt to it, I think is an important thing. And then the discipline aspect is that I think we're in an industry that is just getting sweeter by the day. So the longer that you can be disciplined in your approach and the longer trajectory that you can have with this industry, the better. Like one of my takeaways, and I talk about this internally a lot with my team, which is when we were creating this product, we were getting a lot of traction for just this product. Like we had 1,800 signups in the first 5 days. We had multiple VCs knocking on the door, all within a product that we launched 2 weeks ago. And I think a lot of my team was feeling the pressure of, hey, we better perform on this product because this is the product that could take us to that next level, And what I wanted to express to the team is that, hey, thinking about this individual product as the make it or break it is not the right perspective. Let's take your timeline from looking at 3 months at a time to let's look at 5 months, or let's look at 5 years. And let's think about how can we take these all as lessons to put ourselves in the best position. So that way, when the rest of the industry follows with us, we'll be in a position to take advantage of it. Hence the AI advantage.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then, yeah, for those that are looking to just get into this space, yeah, as you mentioned, there's certifications out there. I think we talked about networking, going to different events, not just AI events, other events, connecting with people, connecting with mentors in the industry, talking to actually your end client to understand what problem you're solving, what are the pain points, what offer can you do to help solve that and create value at the end of the day, right? And those that are kind of in the business right now is like sometimes you're so in the business, it's good to take a step back, right? And to see what else is going out there, right? And I know a lot of folks are bootstrapping, struggling with cash and cash flowing, right? So seeking funding, pitch decks, all those different types of things. So just want to offer encouragement to all the folks out there that are in this and we're, making this happen and, doing it in a way. I think there's a lot of promise in the future. And we talked about that, right?
Definitely. And I would say that the one thing that I always struggle, that I tell people who are struggling is if you are struggling with the business in terms of looking for funding, looking for that product market fit, or any of the other things that we've talked about today, the best thing that you can do is find people who are smarter than you who have done it before. That is my best approach always. I think that asking for support and falling into the ecosystem is a great thing, and especially it becomes interesting because we're in an industry where there is not people who have gone before us, right? Like we don't know what it looks like to be 20 years into generative AI, but we do know people that have been in adjacent fields, or we do know people that have been through similar processes. And I would learn on those experiences and ask them for their advice more than trying to struggle by yourself,
Yeah, I agree. Reach out to folks, but also be wise and protect yourself. Make sure you have NDAs in place. You don't give up too much equity. Don't give away too much of your intellectual property, right? So there's a lot of things reach out, but be wise, be prudent, look out for yourself. So AJ, I feel like we could talk all day about this AI innovation.
Truly.
I think it's been exciting and how to build business in the AI space, right? We're coming up on time. For our listeners, where's the best place they can learn about AJ Green, AI Advantage Agency, or connect with you?
LinkedIn. Please follow me, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to help point people in the right direction. You can find me at AJ Green on LinkedIn or AI Advantage on LinkedIn.
Awesome. This has been wonderful. It's been energetic for me. This is our first episode, so thank you for blessing us on this first episode. I think there'll be some great insights coming out of this. So everyone make sure to check out and connect with AJ Green. Don't forget to follow him and us on LinkedIn. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can find us at the AI Space Podcast on podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple. We're going to be on YouTube, social media, etc. Once again, I was the host, Sanjay Kalluvilayil, founder and CEO of Stonehaas Advisors, also the host for the show. I thank you for the opportunity, and I hope this has been a wonderful conversation for you guys, and I look forward to hearing success from you guys out there. Thanks.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, AJ.